Caleb's voice was bright, too bright, like he was singing on a day someone else was crying. Grandma Rose opened her eyes slowly. The room was still dark, but she could feel morning coming. The air was cold. The blanket felt heavy on her legs. She heard footsteps. Then the bedside lamp clicked on. Rose blinked. The light hurt. Caleb stood there in his crisp white shirt, fixing his cuff like he was about to go to a party. His hair was combed neat. His face looked smooth and happy. Happy. Rose's stomach tightened. This was not a happy day. Caleb leaned closer and smiled, showing his teeth. Not a warm smile, not a kind one, a sharp one. He spoke like he was sharing wonderful news. "Rose," he said, "today's my best day." Rose's mouth went dry. Her hands slipped under the blanket, holding the fabric tight. Caleb's smile grew wider. "I'm taking everything from you." The words fell like stones. Everything. Rose felt her heart thump hard, like it was trying to run away inside her chest. She wanted to sit up and shout why. She wanted to ask what she did wrong. She wanted to beg him to stop. But she did none of that, because begging never helped. Not with Caleb. Rose slowly pushed herself up in bed. Her joints ached the way they always did in winter. She kept her face calm, even though her skin felt hot. Caleb watched her like he was watching a show. Then he stepped back and opened the bedroom door wider. And that was when Rose saw her. A woman stood in the hallway, not shy, not hiding. She leaned on the wall like she belonged there. Her hair was smooth and shiny, and her lipstick was too red for the morning. Now she wore a light coat, the kind people wear when they want to look expensive. Her eyes went straight to Rose, and she smirked. Not a smile. A smirk. Like Rose was a joke. Like Rose was already defeated. Rose's throat tightened. Caleb said with pride, "You remember Tanya." Tanya's smirk stayed on her face. She slowly looked around the room, taking in the dresser, the curtains, the little lamp Rose had bought years ago. Then she gave a tiny laugh, like she was tasting something sweet. Rose's hands shook under the blanket. She pressed her palms together to hide it. She didn't want them to see her shake. Tanya stepped forward. "Morning, Grandma," Tanya said in a soft voice that was not soft at all. Rose didn't answer. Her eyes moved to Caleb, then back to Tanya. Grandma. That word was meant to make Rose sound small. Old. Easy to push. Tanya's eyes slid to the family photo on the wall. It showed Rose holding Ben when he was little, Ben's cheeks round and happy. Tanya tilted her head. "Cute," Tanya said. "I guess you'll be packing that up soon." Rose's chest hurt. She stared at the photo as if it was a life jacket in deep water. Caleb walked to the closet and pulled it open like he owned the air in the room. He pointed at Rose's coats. "These can go," he said. "You don't need them. You won't need much where you're going." Rose swallowed. "Where I'm going?" she asked. Caleb's eyebrows lifted, like he was surprised she dared to speak. He walked back toward the bed. "You'll stay with your daughter," he said. "Or a cheap place, I don't care, the house is mine." Rose's voice came out small. "Or this house, I lived here for years while I paid for it," Caleb snapped. Then his smile returned, quick and fake. "And now it's time for you to leave." Tanya let out a quiet little sound, like a happy sigh. Rose looked at Caleb's hands. They were clean, strong, hands that had signed papers, hands that had taken her name off things without telling her, hands that had closed doors in her face when she asked questions. Rose remembered every time she said, "It's okay, he's just stressed." Every time she said, "He didn't mean it." Every time she told herself, "I'm too old to start over." Caleb didn't just want a divorce. He wanted a win. He wanted Rose to feel small. He wanted her to feel stupid. He wanted her to feel alone. Rose forced her voice to stay steady. "Ben..." Caleb's eyes turned cold. "Don't say his name," he warned. Rose froze. Tanya walked closer, her steps slow and careful like she was enjoying the floor. "I think you should," Tanya said softly. "Say his name. Tell him goodbye. You won't be seeing much of him." Rose's fingers clenched so hard her nails dug into her skin. Ben was her sunshine. Ben was the one who brought her water when she coughed, the one who hugged her without being asked, the one who said, "Grandma, you smell like cookies." Rose's voice shook anyway. "You can't take him from me." Caleb laughed. He actually laughed. "Oh, Rose," he said almost kindly. "I can take whatever I want. I have the money. I have the papers. I have the power." He tapped the side of his head. "I planned this. I planned all of it." Tanya's smirk grew wider. Rose's ears rang. Planned. All of it. And Rose felt something inside her. Not just fear. Not just sadness. Something else. A tiny spark. Because Rose knew something Caleb didn't. Last night, Rose had been sitting at her kitchen table with a cup of tea she never even drank. Her hands had been trembling then too, and across from her Ms. Hart had been calm. Ms. Hart had looked Rose right in the eyes and said, "He's going to come in loud. He's going to try to scare you. He'll act like the world belongs to him." Rose had whispered, "It does. He owns everything." Ms. Hart had shaken her head. "No," she had said. "He only owns what he can control, and control breaks when the truth shows up." Then Ms. Hart had slid a small list across the table, simple steps, clear steps, important steps, and she had said, "If you do exactly what I say, he will walk into court thinking he's a king and leave feeling like a thief caught under bright lights." Rose remembered asking, "What if he finds out?" Ms. Hart had replied, "Let him think he's winning. That's the point." Now, in the bedroom, Caleb stood tall like a man already holding a trophy. Tanya leaned on the doorframe like she was already the new queen of the house. Rose's heart pounded, but her eyes stayed on Caleb's face. She spoke softly. "So, this is your best day?" Caleb's smile was wide and proud. "The best," he said. Rose nodded slowly. "Okay," she said. And the word okay surprised even her. Caleb's eyes narrowed. Tanya's smirk flickered, just a tiny bit like a candle in wind. Rose pushed herself out of bed carefully. She stood up straight even though her knees hurt. She reached for her sweater and pulled it on. Caleb watched every move. He wanted her to break. He wanted tears. He wanted her to beg. Rose didn't give him that. Instead, she said, "I have an appointment today." Caleb's mouth twisted. "You don't have anything." Rose looked at him, calm. "I do," she said. Tanya laughed again. "With who? A knitting club?" Rose didn't look at Tanya. She kept her eyes on Caleb. "Just an appointment," Rose said. Caleb stepped closer, his voice low. "You'll go where I tell you. You'll sign what I tell you. You'll do it quietly." Rose felt the old fear try to rise, but she pushed it down. She said, "No." The room went silent. Even the house seemed to hold its breath. Caleb stared at her like she had spoken in a different language. Then his face changed. The happy mask slipped. And the real Caleb showed up. "You think you can say no," he hissed. Rose's hands trembled at her sides, but she lifted her chin. "I can," she said. Tanya's smirk was gone now. Not fully, but enough. Because something about Rose felt different. Caleb took a step forward, and Rose took a step back, toward the dresser drawer. Not because she was scared, because she needed one thing, just one. Her phone. Her fingers touched it. Caleb didn't notice. He was too busy being angry. Rose slid the phone into her pocket. Caleb leaned close, his breath hot. "You'll regret this," he said. Rose looked him in the eyes, and in her mind she heard Ms. Hart's whisper from last night, like a quiet drumbeat. "Stay calm. Let him talk. Let him show who he is." Rose said nothing. She walked past him. Caleb moved as if to block her. But Tanya touched his arm. "Let her go," Tanya said. "Where can she even go?" Rose kept walking. Out of the bedroom, down the hall, her heart beating like thunder because she wasn't walking away to lose. She was walking toward Ms. Hart, toward the court, toward the moment Caleb thought would be his victory. And in a small private room, just an hour later, Ms. Hart would lean close and whisper, "Did you do exactly what I said?" And Rose would answer, "Yes." And Ms. Hart would smile, not a big smile, not a proud smile, a careful smile. "The show starts now." Rose walked outside with her phone in her pocket and her coat buttoned wrong. She didn't fix the buttons. Not yet. Her hands were still shaking, and the cold morning air hit her face like a slap. The sky was pale grey, the street was quiet. A dog barked far away, and then stopped. Behind her, the front door shut. Not gently. It sounded like a lock clicking inside a cage. Rose stood on the porch for one long second. She didn't turn around. If she turned around, she might run back inside. She might start begging again. She might forget the plan. Instead, she took a slow breath in, and another. Then she walked down the steps. Each step made her knees complain, but her feet kept moving, because something had changed. Not Caleb, not Tanya, Rose. She had spent years telling herself she could handle it, that things would get better, that Caleb would calm down if she stayed quiet, if she smiled, if she didn't ask too many questions. That's what Rose used to do. She stayed small to keep peace, but peace was not the same as safety. Rose had learned that little by little, or like a slow drip from a leaky roof. It started years ago in small ways. Caleb would say, "Don't worry your head about money, Rose. I've got it." At first it sounded sweet. Then it sounded like a rule. When bills came in the mail, Caleb took them before Rose could read them. If Rose asked, he would sigh like she was a problem. "If you trusted me," he would say, "you wouldn't question me." Rose did trust him, so she stopped questioning. Caleb also loved papers. He always had papers. He would put them on the table and tap the line with a pen. "Just sign," he would say. "It's nothing." Sometimes Rose would squint, trying to read the tiny words. Caleb would snatch the page back with a laugh. "Oh, Rose," he'd say like she was silly. "Your eyes. Don't strain." And Rose would feel embarrassed, so she signed. She told herself, "He's my husband. He wouldn't hurt me." But hurt didn't always look like a bruise. Sometimes it looked like an empty bank account you didn't know about. Sometimes it looked like your name disappearing from things you thought were yours. Sometimes it looked like a husband who smiled in public and turned sharp in private. Rose didn't see it all at once. No one does. She saw it in flashes. Like when Caleb bought a new watch and told her they couldn't afford new shoes for Ben. Like when Rose asked for money to fix the kitchen sink and Caleb said, "Stop wasting." Like when Rose heard him on the phone late at night, whispering in the living room. And when she stepped closer, he stopped talking. Then he looked at her like she was a thief. "What are you doing up?" he snapped. Rose would say softly, "Oh, I just wanted water." But her stomach would twist, because his voice didn't sound like a man talking to his wife. It sounded like a man hiding something. Rose kept going anyway. She cooked, she cleaned, she smiled at neighbours. She told Aunt June, "Oh, we're fine." June wanted to believe that. It was easier. And then Ben came into Rose's world like warm sunlight. Ben was small and bright and full of questions. He asked why the moon followed the car. He asked why old trees had bumps. He asked why Grandpa got quiet when Grandma talked. That question hit Rose the hardest. "Does Grandpa not like your stories?" Ben once asked, chewing on a piece of toast. Rose smiled so Ben wouldn't see her eyes getting wet. "Grandpa gets tired," she said. Ben frowned. "But you're not boring." You're funny." Rose reached out and touched Ben's hair. That soft hair made Rose feel brave and sad at the same time, because Ben loved her. And Rose didn't want Ben growing up thinking love meant fear. The first real crack came the day Rose found a cup in the sink with lipstick on it. Not her lipstick. Rose didn't even wear lipstick anymore. She held the cup under the kitchen light. The mark was neat and bright, like someone wanted to be seen. Rose's hands went cold. Caleb walked in and saw the cup. His face didn't change. He just said, "Don't start." Rose didn't even speak, and he still accused her. That was the moment Rose understood something important. Caleb was not just doing wrong. He was ready to punish her for noticing. After that, Rose started doing something she had never done before. She started paying attention. Not loudly, quietly. She began to remember dates. She began to notice names on envelopes. She began to keep small things in a tin box under her sewing supplies. Not because she wanted trouble, because she wanted truth. One afternoon, Mrs. Klein from next door leaned over the fence and said, "Your husband gets a lot of visitors when you're out." Rose's heart jumped. She tried to act normal. "Visitors?" Mrs. Klein raised her eyebrows. "A lady. Tall. Fancy coat." Rose's fingers tightened around the clothespins in her hand. She forced a light laugh. "Oh." Mrs. Klein squinted at Rose. "You deserve better than secrets, Rose." Rose went inside and sat at her kitchen table with her hands flat on the wood, trying to steady her breathing. That night, Rose didn't cry. She didn't scream. She opened her old notebook, and she wrote one line, "Tall lady, fancy coat, afternoon." She didn't know yet that the tall lady had a name, but she would. And when Rose finally met Ms. Hart, she didn't come with wild guesses or angry shouting. She came with quiet facts. That was why Ms. Hart listened. That was why Ms. Hart's voice stayed calm when she said, "Rose, you're not powerless. You're just uninformed. And that can change." Now, as Rose walked down the street toward the bus stop, she held on to that sentence like a rope. Her phone pressed against her leg in her pocket. Her breath puffed in the cold. A car drove past, and for a second Rose thought it might be Caleb coming after her. But it wasn't. The car kept going. Rose reached the bus stop and sat on the bench. Her hands were still shaking. But her mind was clearer than it had been in years. She looked at her phone. She didn't call June. Not yet. June would panic and rush over and maybe make things worse. Instead, Rose opened her messages and found the name Ms. Hart had told her to save. Hart Law Office. Rose stared at it for a moment, then she pressed call. The line rang once, twice. A calm voice answered, "Hart Law Office." Rose swallowed. "This is Rose," she said. "I'm on my way." The voice didn't sound surprised. It sounded ready. "Good," the voice said. "We're expecting you." Rose ended the call and looked up at the road. The bus was coming. And for the first time in a long time, Rose didn't feel like she was being dragged into something. She felt like she was walking into it on purpose, on her own feet, with her head up, not to start a fight, to stop losing her life. The Hart Law Office smelled like paper and mint tea. Grandma Rose sat in a small waiting room with a plant that looked too perfect to be real. Her hands were folded on her lap, but they still shook a little. She kept her purse close, like it was the only thing in the world that belonged to her for sure. A receptionist smiled kindly. "Ms. Hart will see you now." Rose stood up slowly. Her knees clicked. She followed the receptionist down a hallway where the floor was so clean it looked wet, even though it wasn't. Then she stepped into Ms. Hart's office. Ms. Hart was not loud. She wasn't the type of lawyer who slammed fists or shouted. She was calm. Her hair was pulled back tight. Her desk was neat. Her eyes were sharp in a quiet way, like she could see through walls. She didn't waste time. "Sit, Ms. Hart said gently. Rose sat. Ms. Hart slid a folder across the desk. "Tell me what happened this morning." The exact words. Rose's mouth felt dry again. She looked down at her hands and forced herself to say it. "He woke up smiling," Rose whispered, "like it was a holiday. Then he said, 'Today's my best day. I'm taking everything from you.'" Ms. Hart's pen stopped moving for a moment. "And the other woman?" Ms. Hart asked. Rose's throat tightened. "She was there, in the hallway. She smirked at me." Ms. Hart nodded once, slow. "Good. You remembered details. That matters." Rose blinked. "Good." Ms. Hart leaned back. "People like Caleb rely on confusion. They rely on you for getting the order of things. But you're paying attention now." Rose looked away. She felt embarrassed, like she had just admitted something shameful. "Oh, I should have paid attention years ago," Rose said softly. Ms. Hart didn't judge her. She didn't pity her either. "You did what many people do," Ms. Hart said. "You tried to keep peace. But peace with a bully is just quiet fear. Now we do this differently," Rose swallowed. "Can he really take everything?" Ms. Hart opened the folder and tapped a page with her finger. "He can try, but trying is not the same as winning." Rose's heart thumped. Ms. Hart continued, "Before we talk about court, I need the truth about your life with him, not the polite version, the real version." Rose stared at the desk. The wood grain looked like little waves. Then she began. She told Ms. Hart about the papers Caleb made her sign without reading, about the way he controlled the bank cards, about how he smiled in front of neighbours and turned sharp behind closed doors, about how he used her age like a weapon, saying she was forgetful when she asked simple questions. Ms. Hart listened without interrupting. When Rose finished, Ms. Hart said, "I want you to understand something, Rose. This divorce is not just about a marriage ending." Rose's voice came out small. "What is it about then?" Ms. Hart looked Rose straight in the eyes. "It's about control," she said. "He wants you to feel like you have no choices. That's why he brought the mistress into your home. It was meant to humiliate you." Rose's cheeks burned. She hated that it worked. Ms. Hart added, "But humiliation can be useful." Rose frowned. "Useful. Yes," Ms. Hart said, "because it makes people careless. And careless people make mistakes." A warm cup of tea appeared on a coaster in front of Rose. Rose didn't even see when Ms. Hart set it there. Rose wrapped her hands around the cup. The heat calmed her fingers. Ms. Hart spoke slowly. "I gave you steps to follow. You said you did them." Rose nodded. Ms. Hart's voice stayed even. "Good. Then we are not walking into this blind." Rose took a small sip of tea. It tasted like lemon. For a moment, Rose felt steady. Then Ms. Hart asked, "Do you know her name?" Rose hesitated. "Tanya." Ms. Hart wrote it down. "Have you seen her before today?" Rose looked at the window. Outside, people walked by like their lives were simple. "I think so," Rose said. "A neighbour mentioned a tall lady in a fancy coat, and I saw a woman once, at a cafe. Caleb was across the street. He didn't see me." "Ms.?" Hart's pen moved again. "When?" Rose tried to remember. "Maybe 2 months ago." Ms. Hart nodded, then said something that made Rose's stomach tighten again. "Rose," she said, "I want you to be ready. Tanya will not stay hidden anymore." Rose's fingers gripped the cup. "Why?" "Because Caleb thinks he's already won," Ms. Hart said. "And winners like to show off." Rose felt a cold wave move through her. She pictured Tanya leaning in the hallway with that smirk. Like she owned Rose's life. Rose's voice trembled. "She called me Grandma, like it was a joke." Ms. Hart's face didn't change, but her eyes hardened. She chose that word for a reason. People like Tanya think age means weakness. Rose looked down at her hands. The skin was thin. The veins showed more than they used to. "I am old," Rose said. Ms. Hart leaned forward. You are experienced. You have lived long enough to recognize patterns. You are not weak." Rose blinked fast. Her eyes stung. Ms. Hart slid another sheet forward. "Here's what happens next. We prepare. We stay calm. We let Caleb talk. We let him show the court who he is." Rose took a deep breath. "And Ben." Ms. Hart softened. "We protect Ben. That is not a question. That is the goal." Rose nodded slowly, holding that sentence inside her like a promise. When Rose left the office, the air outside felt even colder, but her steps felt more solid. She pulled her coat tighter and walked toward the bus stop. Halfway there, her phone buzzed. A message popped up from an unknown number. Rose's thumb hovered for a second before she tapped it. Unknown number. "I hope you don't make this messy. Some women know when to step aside. Rose's heart dropped. She stared at the words until they blurred. Then she inhaled slow and deep and whispered to herself, "I'm not stepping aside." She didn't reply. She didn't need to. Rose put the phone back in her pocket and kept walking, because now she understood something important. Tanya wasn't just Caleb's secret anymore. Tanya was part of the fight, and Rose was done pretending she couldn't fight back. Grandma Rose didn't answer the message. She read it one more time, then locked her phone and slid it deep into her purse under her wallet and tissues. Her heart was still pounding, but her face stayed calm. That was the first rule Ms. Hart had taught her. Don't react where your enemy can use it. Rose got off the bus 2 stops early on purpose. She didn't want to go straight home. Caleb might be watching. But Tanya might be watching too. Or maybe they weren't. But Rose had learned something important over the years. When you live with someone who likes control, you start to doubt what's real. So Rose chose a safer path. She walked to the public library. It was warm inside, quiet, safe in a way her house had not been safe for a long time. Rose sat at a table near the back, where no one paid attention. She opened her purse slowly and pulled out the small tin box she always carried now. Inside were plain things that looked useless to anyone else. Folded papers, little notes with dates, a printed bank statement, a copy of her marriage certificate, a photo of a receipt she took with her phone. Rose stared at them, then took a deep breath. She wasn't doing this because she wanted to win. She was doing this because she wanted to stop being erased. Her phone buzzed again. Another message. Rose's fingers went cold as she unlocked the screen. Unknown number. He's being generous. Don't ruin it. Rose's throat tightened. Generous. Like giving her nothing was a gift. Rose wanted to throw the phone across the room. She wanted to scream so loud the whole library would hear, but she didn't. She did exactly what Ms. Hart told her. Rose took a screenshot, then another screenshot showing the number. Then she turned her phone off. Her hands still trembled, but now she felt something else too. Not panic, power. Because now it wasn't just Rose's word against theirs. Now it was proof. Rose left the library and walked to a small cafe across the street. She chose a table by the window where she could see outside. She ordered tea she didn't really want, just so she could sit there without anyone asking questions. Then she called Ms. Hart. Ms. Hart answered quickly like she expected it. "Tell me," Ms. Hart said. Rose spoke low. "I got messages from an unknown number. It sounds like Tanya." "Did you reply?" Ms. Hart asked. "No," Rose said. "Good," Ms. Hart replied. "Did you save them?" "Yes." Ms. Hart's voice stayed calm. "Perfect. Those messages help us. They show pressure. They show intent." Rose swallowed. "She wants me to step aside." Ms. Hart gave a small sound, not a laugh, more like a breath. "Rose," she said, "people who truly feel safe don't send threats." Rose held her cup tighter. "What do I do now?" Ms. Hart didn't rush her. She spoke clearly, and like each word was a step on a staircase. "Now we follow the rules," Ms. Hart said. "Rule 1, keep everything, every message, every paper, every change." Rose nodded, even though Ms. Hart couldn't see. "Rule 2, Ms. Hart continued. Don't tell Caleb what you know, not even a hint." Rose's mouth tightened. "He'll notice I'm not afraid." "Let him notice," Ms. Hart said, "but don't explain. Confusion makes careless people sloppy." Rose's eyes flicked to the street outside. A man walked by carrying groceries. A mother held a child's hand. Normal life. Rose remembered when she used to think her life was normal too. Ms. Hart said, "Rule 3, keep yourself safe. If you feel unsure, you go to someone you trust. Not someone who panics, someone steady." Rose thought of Aunt June. June loved Rose, but June also hated conflict. June wanted to fix things with kind words and soft voices. Caleb didn't respond to kindness. He used it. Rose said quietly, "What about Ben?" Ms. Hart's voice softened. "Ben stays out of it. Children shouldn't carry adult wars." Rose's chest ached. "He already feels it." "I know," Ms. Hart said. So we protect him with routine, school, meals, bedtime, and your calm is his shelter. Rose closed her eyes for a moment. My calm is his shelter. That sentence felt heavy, but it also felt true. Ms. Hart added, and now the most important rule. Rose opened her eyes. What is it? Ms. Hart paused just long enough to make Rose lean closer to the phone. Rule 4, Ms. Hart said. We let Caleb speak first in court. We let him brag. We let him exaggerate. We let him show his greed. Rose frowned. Why? Isn't that dangerous? No, Ms. Hart said. It's useful. When a person claims they own everything, they often forget that ownership has rules. Rose stared at the tea. The surface trembled slightly from her hand. Rose, Ms. Hart continued, you told me he made you sign papers you didn't understand. Yes, Rose whispered. And you told me he blocked you from money and information. Ms. Hart said. Yes. Ms. Hart's voice turned firm. Then he has built his case on control, not fairness. Courts don't like control games, especially when they target someone older. Rose's stomach flipped. Will the judge believe me? Ms. Hart didn't promise miracles. She didn't paint a perfect picture. She said the truth. The judge will believe evidence, Ms. Hart said. That's why we move carefully. That's why we document. Rose nodded again, of course slow. Then Ms. Hart asked, Do you remember the list I gave you last night? Rose's fingers tightened on the phone. Yes. Did you do exactly what I said? Ms. Hart asked. Rose didn't answer right away. She remembered last night at her kitchen table, the way the house felt like a sleeping animal, the way she had held her pen like it weighed 100 pounds. She remembered making copies, taking pictures, putting the tin box in her purse, writing down dates even when her hand cramped. She remembered how scared she was, and she remembered doing it anyway. Rose inhaled. Yes, she said. Ms. Hart's voice lowered, almost like a whisper. Good, Ms. Hart said. Then the show really does start soon. Rose hung up and sat still for a moment. Her tea had gone lukewarm. Outside, the sky was still grey. But Rose didn't feel grey inside anymore. She felt like a person who finally had a map. When she reached home later, the driveway was empty. Caleb was gone. Tanya was gone. The house was quiet. Too quiet. Rose stepped inside slowly. At first, everything looked normal. Then, she saw it. The family photo on the wall, Rose holding Ben, was gone. Not broken, not dropped, removed. A clean rectangle of lighter paint showed where it used to be. Rose stared at that empty spot until her eyes stung. It was a small thing, but it was also a message. I can take your memories too. Rose's hands shook, but she didn't cry. She walked to the kitchen drawer, took out her notebook, and wrote one line. Family photo removed. Today. Then she took a breath, straightened her shoulders, and whispered to the quiet house, You can take a picture off a wall, Caleb. But you can't take the truth out of my hands. The next morning, Grandma Rose woke up before the sun. The house was quiet but not peaceful, quiet like someone was listening. Rose sat at the edge of the bed and looked at her hands. They were steady today, not perfect, but steadier than yesterday. She whispered Ms. Hart's rules to herself like a prayer. Keep everything. Don't warn him. Stay calm. Then she stood up, washed her face and made oatmeal for Ben. Ben came into the kitchen in his socks, rubbing his eyes. Grandma, he said, why is the picture gone? Rose's heart pinched. She kept stirring the oatmeal so Ben wouldn't see her face change. Grandpa moved it, she said gently. Ben frowned. Aren't why? Rose turned and smiled the kind of smile that protects children. Sometimes grown-ups do odd things when they feel mad, she said. But you and I? We keep our morning the same. Ben climbed onto his chair. Can I have raisins? Yes, Rose said, and she sprinkled raisins like tiny dark dots on top. Ben ate and talked about school and a new game on the playground. Rose nodded and answered at the right times. She kept it normal. Because Ms. Hart was right, routine was Ben's shelter. After Ben left for school, Rose moved through the house carefully. She didn't search drawers in a panic. She didn't slam cupboards. She didn't cry on the kitchen floor. She did something calmer. She walked from room to room and noticed what was missing. Not big things, small things. A folder Rose kept in the side table, gone. And a little pouch of old family letters, moved. A box of Ben's baby keepsakes pushed deeper into a closet. Caleb wasn't stealing just stuff. He was stealing comfort. Rose wrote each change in her notebook, one line at a time. Then she went to the hallway closet and found her winter scarf. It was still there. She held it for a moment, breathing in the smell of laundry soap. He didn't take everything, she thought. Not yet. At noon, Rose's phone buzzed. A message from Aunt June. "Are you okay?" Caleb called me. He sounded strange. Rose stared at the words. Caleb calling June meant one thing. He was building his story. Rose typed back slowly. "I'm okay. I'll explain later. Please don't argue with him. Just listen." June replied almost right away. "Rose, I'm worried." Rose swallowed. "I know. But please trust me. I have a lawyer." Her name is Ms. Hart." There was a long pause. Then June wrote, "Okay, I'll do what you say." Rose let out a small breath. It felt like letting go of a heavy bag. That was the first time in years that someone followed Rose's lead. Later that afternoon, Caleb came home. He walked in like he owned the floor under Rose's feet. He carried a thick envelope. He tossed it on the kitchen table with a smack. "Divorce papers," he said, like he was handing out prizes. Rose looked at the envelope but didn't touch it. Caleb's eyes narrowed. "Aren't you going to open it? Aren't you going to cry?" Rose folded a dish towel calmly. "I'll have my lawyer read it." Caleb blinked like the word lawyer tasted bad. Then his smile returned, wide and fake. "You got a lawyer?" he said. "That's adorable." Behind him, Tanya stepped into the doorway. Rose's stomach tightened, but she kept her face still. Tanya wore the same fancy coat as before. Her hair was perfect again. Her eyes swept over the kitchen like she was checking if it was clean enough for her. Then she looked at Rose and smirked. "You still here?" Tanya asked, as if Rose was an insect that refused to leave. Caleb laughed. "She thinks she has rights." Rose met Caleb's eyes. "I do." Tanya walked closer, tapping her nails lightly on the counter. Tap, tap, tap. "I told you not to make this messy," Tanya said. Rose didn't answer. Ms. Hart's rule echoed in her mind. "Don't fight with the messenger. Save the message." Caleb leaned forward. "Listen to me, Rose. I'm being generous. You'll get a small amount. Enough for your little groceries and knitting." Rose's hands stayed on the towel. "What about the house?" Rose asked. Caleb shrugged. "Mine." "The savings?" Rose asked. Caleb's smile sharpened. "Mine." Rose tilted her head slightly. "And Ben?" Tanya made a soft, pleased sound. Caleb's face went hard. "Ben stays with his mother. You'll see him when we allow it." Rose's chest hurt, but she didn't flinch. She spoke slowly like she was reading a simple sentence. "You don't get to allow love," she said. For 1 second, Caleb looked surprised. Then he snapped, "Don't talk like you're brave, you're old, you're tired, you'll fold." Tanya's smirk grew. Rose looked at Tanya, then at Caleb, and she said something that made the air change. "I'm not folding," Rose said. "I'm documenting." Caleb froze. "What did you say?" Rose didn't repeat it. She didn't have to. A small silence filled the kitchen, a thick like soup. Tanya's fingers stopped tapping. Caleb's eyes searched Rose's face, trying to find fear. Rose gave him nothing. Caleb grabbed the envelope and shoved it toward her again. "Sign," he ordered. "Sign today." Rose stepped back. "No." Caleb's voice rose. "You want a court fight? Fine. I'll make sure everyone sees you as a confused old woman." Rose's hands clenched, but she kept her voice calm. "Then we'll let the court decide." Tanya leaned in close to Caleb and whispered something in his ear. Rose couldn't hear the words, but she saw Caleb's jaw tighten. He was not as relaxed as he pretended, because now Rose wasn't begging. She wasn't apologizing. She wasn't even explaining. She was standing there like a locked door. Caleb pushed the envelope into his bag and turned sharply. "Get ready," he said. "You'll regret this." Tanya walked after him, but before she left the kitchen she glanced back at Rose. Her smirk was smaller now. Not gone, but smaller. When the front door closed, Rose finally let out the breath she had been holding. She didn't shake. She didn't collapse. She walked to her purse, pulled out her phone, and opened her notes. With steady fingers she typed, "Caleb demanded signature today. Threatened to call me confused. Tanya present." Then Rose put the phone away and stood in her quiet kitchen. The family photo was still missing, but Rose felt something new growing in the empty space. Not sadness, not fear. A hard, clear certainty. Caleb could perform all he wanted. But for the first time, Rose wasn't watching the show. She was preparing the spotlight. 3 days later, Grandma Rose stood in a hallway that smelled like old paint and strong coffee. The courthouse. People walked past with folders, tired faces, and fast steps. Shoes clicked on the floor like tiny hammers. Rose held her purse with both hands. Inside it were her phone, her notebook, and her tin box. Inside her chest was a heartbeat that would not slow down. Ms. Hart walked beside her, calm as ever, carrying a thin stack of papers like they weighed nothing. "Remember," Ms. Hart said softly, "we don't chase him. We let him chase himself." Rose nodded. Across the hall, Caleb arrived like a king. He wore a dark suit and a wide smile. He shook hands with people Rose didn't know. He spoke too loud, like he wanted the building to hear him. And Tanya was there. Of course she was. She stood close to him. The arm linked through his like she was already his wife. Her fancy coat looked new. Her smirk looked practiced. When Tanya saw Rose, she tilted her head and smiled like honey that hides a sharp taste. Caleb walked over, stopping just a few steps away. "Well, well," he said. "You actually showed up." Rose didn't answer. Ms. Hart did. "My client is here on time," Ms. Hart said. "Let's keep this respectful." Caleb's smile didn't reach his eyes. "Respectful," he repeated. "Sure." He leaned slightly toward Rose. His voice dropped. "You're going to regret dragging this out," he whispered. Rose's fingers tightened on her purse strap. Ms. Hart stepped between them without raising her voice. "Save it for the judge," Tanya smirked again. "Grandma looks nervous." Rose wanted to say, "I am nervous." She wanted to say, "I'm scared." Because it was true. But she also remembered Ben's face at breakfast, the way he asked if Grandma would pick him up after school. Rose swallowed her fear like a hard bite of bread. "I'm not nervous," Rose said calmly. "I'm present." Tanya's smile twitched. Caleb's eyebrows lifted, as if Rose had surprised him again. A door opened. "Case of Rose and Caleb," a clerk called. Rose's legs felt heavy, but she walked forward anyway. Inside the room, everything looked smaller than Rose expected. A simple desk, a flag, a judge with tired eyes. No drama, no music, just truth and rules. Caleb spoke first, just like Miss Hart wanted. He stood tall and sighed like a sad hero. "Your Honor," Caleb began, "I've tried to be fair, I've tried to be patient, but my wife—" He looked at Rose and smiled faintly. "She's confused. She forgets things. She gets upset. I worry about her." Rose's stomach turned, confused. There it was, the word Caleb loved, the word he used like a cage. Caleb went on, "I've always handled finances because she can't. I'm asking for a simple divorce. I'll even give her a little help. But I need the house. I need protection from this conflict." Tanya sat behind him very still, smiling like this was a movie she paid to watch. Then it was Ms. Hart's turn. Ms. Hart didn't sound angry. She sounded clear. "Your Honor," Ms. Hart said, "Caleb is claiming Rose is confused, but here are records showing she has been managing daily care for her grandchild, handling appointments and keeping detailed notes of changes in the home. Ms. Hart handed over papers. The judge looked down. Rose's throat tightened. This was the scary part. Waiting while someone else held your life in their hands. Ms. Hart continued. We also have messages sent to Rose pressuring her to step aside, and we have screenshots with dates and the sending number. The judge's eyes narrowed slightly as they read. Caleb's smile faded for a second. Tanya shifted in her seat. Just a small shift. But Rose saw it. Ms. Hart added, Caleb also attempted to push Rose to sign papers immediately and threatened to make her look mentally unfit if she did not. Caleb's head snapped up. That's not what I said. The judge lifted one hand. Mr. Caleb, the judge said, you will not interrupt. Caleb's mouth closed, but his jaw tightened so hard Rose could see the muscle jump. For the first time, he didn't look like a king. He looked like a man trying to hold a door shut with one hand while a storm pushed from the other side. Ms. Hart turned slightly. We are asking for temporary protections today. Not the final outcome. Temporary, the judge nodded. Go on. Ms. Hart spoke with care. Rose needs stable access to money for basic needs, and she needs protection from intimidation. Also, because a child is involved in her daily care, we request that Caleb not interfere with Rose's contact with her grandchild during this process. Rose held her breath. Caleb's eyes flashed. He's not her child. Ms. Hart didn't blink. But Rose is part of the child's life. Removing her suddenly would harm the child. That matters. The judge's pen tapped once. Then the judge looked at Caleb. Mr. Caleb, the judge said, do you have proof that Rose is mentally unfit? Caleb opened his mouth, then closed it. He tried again. She forgets. The judge's voice stayed steady. That is not proof. Do you have medical records? Evaluations? Caleb's face went tight. No, he said. The judge looked down again and wrote something. Rose's palms were damp inside her gloves. She felt like she was standing on thin ice, waiting to see if it would hold. After a long moment, the judge spoke. Temporary orders, the judge said. Rose's heart jumped. The judge continued. Rose will have access to funds for basic living needs. Mr. Caleb will not pressure her to sign documents without counsel. Any intimidation or harassment will be taken seriously. Rose's eyes stung. Not because she won, because someone finally said out loud, that what Caleb was doing was wrong. The judge added, and there will be no sudden disruption of Rose's contact with the child during this process. Caleb's face changed, not shocked, angry, the kind of angry that tries to hide behind manners. Yes, Your Honor, he said through his teeth. The hearing ended quickly after that. Outside the courtroom, Caleb walked past Rose like she was air. Tanya followed, but her smirk was gone now. When Tanya glanced back, her eyes didn't look proud anymore. They looked worried. Rose didn't chase them. She didn't smile. She didn't celebrate. She just stood there breathing, while Ms. Hart gathered the papers. Ms. Hart leaned close and spoke so softly only Rose could hear. This is the first crack, Ms. Hart whispered. He feels it. Rose nodded. Her legs were shaky as she walked out into the cold air, but her spine felt straighter. Her phone buzzed. This time it was a message from Ben's school. Reminder, pick up at 3:10. Rose stared at it for a moment. Then she smiled. Small, real, and tired. Okay, she whispered to herself, one normal thing at a time. And she started walking toward the bus stop, holding her purse like it held her whole future, because right now, it did. The final hearing came on a Tuesday morning. The sky was clear like nothing bad had ever happened. But Grandma Rose felt the weight of every bad day she had swallowed for years. She stood outside the courthouse with Ms. Hart. Cars passed, people hurried by with coffee cups and tired eyes. Rose's hands were cold. Not from the weather, from the waiting. Ms. Hart looked at Rose's face, then leaned close and whispered the same words she had whispered before, soft as a secret. Did you do exactly what I said? Rose nodded once. Yes. Ms. Hart's mouth turned into the smallest smile. The show starts now. Rose breathed in slowly. Across the street, Caleb arrived like he was still sure of himself. New suit, shiny shoes, a grin that tried to look friendly. And Tanya walked beside him, arm hooked through his. Tanya's smirk was back like she had missed it. When she spotted Rose, she tilted her head and mouthed, "Good luck." But it didn't sound kind. It sounded like a joke. Caleb strolled closer and spoke like he was making a deal at a store. "Last chance," he said. "Sign the papers my way, and you can leave with your pride." Rose didn't move. She didn't argue. She just said, "I brought mine." Caleb's smile twitched. "Your... what?" "My truth," Rose said. Tanya let out a small laugh. "Grandma thinks she's a hero." Rose looked at Tanya calm and steady. "No," Rose said. "I'm just done being quiet." Inside the courtroom, everything felt smaller than the fear in Rose's chest. The judge sat high behind the desk, eyes sharp, voice steady. Everyone stood. Everyone sat. Then Caleb began, just like always, with a story. He talked about being fair. He talked about helping Rose. He talked about Rose being confused again, like he couldn't stop using that word. He ended with a proud sentence. "I've handled everything for years," Caleb said. "So it makes sense that I keep the house, the savings, and the business accounts. She can't manage those things." Tanya sat behind him, smirking like she was watching a show she already knew the ending to. Then Ms. Hart stood. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't roll her eyes. She didn't insult Caleb. She spoke calmly, like she was reading a simple list. "Your Honor," Ms. Hart said, "Mr. Caleb says he handled everything. That is true. But handling everything is not the same as owning everything." Caleb's smile returned. "Exactly." Ms. Hart nodded like she agreed. Then she turned a page. "And that's where the problem begins," she said. Ms. Hart placed a folder in front of the judge. "First," Ms. Hart said, "we have a timeline of intimidation. Messages sent to Rose telling her to step aside, telling her not to make it messy, and calling his cruelty generous. These are dated. These are saved. These match the number we provided earlier." The judge looked down and read. Tanya's smirk thinned. Caleb's face tightened, but he stayed silent. Ms. Hart continued. "Second," she said, "we have evidence that Mr. Caleb removed personal property from the home during this divorce process. Items that belonged to Rose and items meant for the child's memories. This was not an accident. Rose documented what changed, when it changed, and what disappeared." Rose's stomach knotted as Ms. Hart spoke, because it wasn't easy to admit you were being treated like you didn't matter. But it was worse to stay quiet and let it continue. Ms. Hart turned another page. "Third," she said, "Mr. Caleb has repeated the claim that Rose is confused, yet Rose has shown consistent, careful record keeping and stable caregiving for her grandchild." The judge glanced at Rose. Rose didn't look away. Then Ms. Hart said the sentence that made the whole room feel different. "And now," Ms. Hart said, "the part Mr. Caleb didn't expect." Caleb's chin lifted like he was ready to argue. But Ms. Hart wasn't guessing. She was placing facts on the table one by one. Ms. Hart held up a printed statement. "Mr. Caleb claims there is no meaningful savings," she said. "But this account exists?" Caleb's eyes flashed. "That's..." The judge lifted a hand. "Do not interrupt," Ms. Hart added. "This account does not appear in the documents Mr. Caleb provided to the court." Tanya sat up straighter. Her eyes darted to Caleb, not proud now, sharp, like she was thinking, "You didn't tell me this." Ms. Hart kept going, still calm. "We also have records showing money moved out of shared funds shortly before the divorce filing," she said. "Rose did not approve those moves. She did not understand the papers she was pushed to sign, and we are requesting the court review them." Caleb's mouth opened. No sound came out at first. His face lost its color, little by little like paint fading in rain. The judge turned to Caleb. "Mr. Caleb, The judge said, "Are you saying under oath that you disclosed all accounts and all relevant funds?" Caleb swallowed. "Yes," he said, but the word came out too fast. The judge's eyes stayed on him. Ms. Hart didn't smile. She didn't celebrate. She simply placed one more document down. "Your Honor," Ms. Hart said, "Oh, this is a record from the institution showing the account's history and the name connected to it." The judge read in silence. In that silence, Rose heard her own heartbeat. Loud, heavy, real. Tanya's smirk was gone now. Completely. She looked at Caleb like she was seeing him for the first time, not as a winner, as a man who lied to everyone, even her. Caleb's voice cracked. "This is being twisted," the judge finally spoke, slow and firm. "What I see," the judge said, "is an attempt to hide assets, intimidate a spouse, and paint her as unfit without proof." Caleb shook his head. "No." The judge raised a hand again. "I am ordering a full financial review," the judge said. "Temporary protections remain. Harassment will have consequences. And I am awarding Rose fair access to funds and legal costs based on what I'm seeing today." Rose's eyes stung, not because she felt rich, because she felt seen, because someone with power finally looked at Caleb and said, "No." Caleb sat down slowly, like his legs forgot how to hold him. His best day had turned into a tight room full of questions he couldn't dodge. His nightmare wasn't screaming or drama. It was facts. It was paper. It was the truth, standing calmly in front of him. Outside the courthouse, Rose felt the cold air fill her lungs like new life. Ms. Hart walked beside her. "You did well," Ms. Hart said. Rose nodded, voice small. "I didn't think I could," Ms. Hart replied. "You already did. You just didn't know it yet." Rose went straight to Ben's school. When Ben ran into her arms, Rose held him tight. "Grandma," Ben said, "are we okay?" Rose kissed his hair. "Yes," she whispered, "we're okay." That evening, Rose went home and put the family photo back on the wall, right where it belonged. Then she made warm cookies with Ben, and for the first time in a long time, the kitchen felt like her home again. Not because the world became perfect, but because fear was no longer the boss of her life. If you want more stories where the weak person surprises everyone and takes their life back, like subscribe and comment one word, show, and tell me. Should Grandma Rose tell Ben the full truth or keep protecting his peace?